Hi guys, can you hear me? Cool. Okay. So thank you for being here with me today, this charming Friday afternoon. Okay. So today I will speak about coding less and accomplishing more, basically an approach to decoupling Drupal with GraphQL. And I introduced this session in June in Drupal camp in Poland, and at that time it was more like, let's say, technical. I had some examples of GraphQL queries and how the interaction with frontend works. This time I will focus more on the Drupal side of things, so how we actually handle the content. So my name is Keppert. I'm head of web development at Ferratum. I will just quickly introduce the company because we are not so well known. So we are a provider of financial services based in Finland. We have 900 employees across Europe, and we have operations in 25 countries, so it's quite a big operation. And my team is responsible for handling basically the front-end websites of the company. So, yeah. Okay, quickly to the agenda. Sorry. We will talk first about why to decouple in the first place. Then we will talk about how it works in our circumstances, why we chose GraphQL, and how is actually the integration between Drupal and GraphQL working. We will have some examples of content editing and how it looks on the front-end website. And lastly, I will reserve some space for talking about some considerations and challenges when it comes to decoupling Drupal. Okay. So some reasons why to decouple, let's say quick selling points. So first is kind of obvious. You can use the single content management system. If it is not handling any, let's say, templating, you can use it to serve content to multiple platforms. Let's say mobile application, website, another website, whatever. The other is also obvious. Frontend can be a single-page application, which is cool if you need to use some features, single-page applications, which might be, for example, some push notifications and so on. Third is kind of technical, so you can choose front-end framework, switch between different, let's say, JavaScript frameworks if necessary without actually touching the backend, which is built on proven content management systems. As you know, the JavaScript frameworks kind of change faster than the content management systems. I mean, Drupal has been on the market, let's say, a decade more than any Angular or React framework, right? So it's kind of future-proof to isolate the backend part from the front end, and it is also more secure, arguably, because then you can actually hide Drupal behind some kind of firewall. It can be, let's say, accessed internally from the company's network. It doesn't have to be accessible from the outside. So if you have any security issue on Drupal, it's then of less importance. And you actually expose just your, let's say, client-side application. Okay, so quickly, what do we handle? As I said, we are basically handling a customer-facing front-end for our online lending and banking business in 25 countries. We basically, what we handle are like content pages, so that means like blog, some texts. Then we have kind of a becoming customer process, my account section, so that means the front end actually handles also like customer interaction with our systems. That means management of customer data and products. What we are always trying to do is to like work, let's say, feature-based. So we introduce a feature, then it can be used in all the countries, just let's say as a matter of configuration. So we don't develop like country-specific websites, then we would have like 25 different projects and it would be quite unmaintainable. So we have just one front end and one back end. We have Drupal multi-site, but all the time like the same code base. Currently we have Drupal, the most of the countries are currently running on Drupal 7 for several years. So it's kind of obvious why we want to change the solution, since Drupal 7 is nearing its end of life, and it will take us some time to migrate everything. So the new architecture is basically built on Angular 6, which acts as a front-end application. Then we have Drupal 8 as a headless content management system, so it really provides only data. It doesn't handle any templating whatsoever. It doesn't even know how the data are presented on the front end. Then we have other backend systems which contain customer data, product data, and so on. Some of them have REST interfaces, some of them have GraphQL interfaces, and we basically have like one Node.js server in the middle, which kind of aggregates all the data from these GraphQL and REST systems and provides one unified GraphQL interface to the client-side application. So it's kind of easier, let's say, on the front-end side. The complexity is kept to a minimum because the front-end only talks to the GraphQL endpoint, and it doesn't care about like what kind of systems are behind it. That was actually the reason for choosing GraphQL also for Drupal. Arguably, more mature is, for example, JSON API, but then again, if I have already a GraphQL server, it makes more sense to me to just plug in the Drupal GraphQL schema and work with that, because I already have to have the server, I have to have the knowledge, so I just use the technologies which I use with other systems. So yeah, if you don't know GraphQL, it's basically, let's say, alternative to REST. It's customer-centric and consumer-centric, consumer-agnostic, which basically means that it is a schema, and as opposed to REST endpoint has well-defined return value. You send, for example, node ID, it will return you the information about the node in, let's say, predefined way. GraphQL has just a schema. You can request any fields from the node or multiple nodes as you please, and it will return just the information that you want. So consumer says what he wants to see, not the backend what he wants to provide. So this is like the main difference. So if you have, for example, multiple consumers, like a mobile application and a website, or multiple websites, they can request just the information they need. Cool thing about GraphQL, it's the schema is self-documented, so it kind of saves you time writing the documentation. It's strongly typed, so it plays well with strongly typed languages like Java on the backend side, or TypeScript, for example, which we use on the Angular side, obviously. And it's a single endpoint. So that means all the information are requested in one single request, and as opposed, again, to having multiple REST endpoints, doing multiple requests to each of them, and this obviously increases performance. So, GraphQL module is under active development. It's currently in version 3.0 RC2. At that time, when I was introducing this talk in June, it was still in beta. You can see by now that it is much more stable than it was before. There are not so many changes and so on, so it's very easier for you to work with. I can really recommend actually working with GraphQL because there is active community around it. There is an active Slack channel, people who will actually help you if you run into some issues. And playing with the module and trying it out and possibly fixing some issues in the piece is kind of good option for, like, let's say, technical growth. If you're looking for some contributed project to play with, this is perhaps quite a good opportunity. So as I said, it's solid, it's well designed, there are not so many changes. RC2 has been released in September. And sorry, what I will definitely do still, is the thing is that if you have a decoupled solution, then you have Drupal as a backend providing some schema to the front end. And the front end, of course, for it to work, it needs to make some assumptions about the schema, like, it's going to return these fields, which will have these types, and so on. Obviously, if you start returning something else, you will break the front end. So it's very beneficial to actually test for, let's say, schema changes via some automated testing using, let's say, I don't know, some schema diffs, like before update, after update, to see what has actually changed. You can have GraphQL snapshot testing in place, so have some requests which you fire against the backend, and they should return the same kind of response that, before and after update that the front end kind of expects. So this way you protect yourself if there would be some change in the GraphQL module which you didn't notice as you were performing the update. You didn't you didn't read the release notes properly or something. Automated test will definitely protect you from breaking your front-end solution. So let's slowly move, let's say, to the example section. I will briefly describe what we are actually done to be able to use GraphQL quite efficiently. So first, we are using component-based design. So that means we are no longer designing pages, as it was a few years back. We would probably write design pages, and that would be it. Now we are kind of designing components. So some box with picture and some hero box and so on, and we just put these components together. It's basically all built around paragraphs. As I said, we are doing full decoupling, so page is just provided as a structured data. It doesn't really contain any HTML, aside from some, headings and things like this, but definitely not user customizable stuff. So basically CMS tells what to display and the front end handles the how. Cool. So why we are doing it, again, it is front-end agnostic, so different front ends can display the data in various ways. Content structure consistency basically means that we are very strict in specifying the options for the content editors. They have no options like to use free HTML and stuff like this, because if you give them this option, then probably you'll know from experience what's going to happen. It's not going to look good. And it will make the design updates for you more complicated. If you are strict on you strictly define building blocks and the options, no free HTML and stuff, you can be confident that if you have 25 websites and you do this and this design update, then it's gonna kind of look the same on all of them, not differently. So we have restricted the use of WYSIWYG quite a lot, and we are generating the page structure using two contributed modules, paragraphs and box, and we have, of course, multiple types of each of these, so that we really can specify okay, this is the kind of component that the editor should use for this purpose, and so on. I will show it a bit later. You won't be familiar with the box module. It's basically because paragraphs are well-known module. Box is my creation. I will explain in a short while why we didn't use blocks. Because if you check the description of the purpose of the things generated by these modules, box acts like a classic block, right? It's it's embeddable. One box is found in many places. It has standalone editing interface. It's not edited inside a node. For example, company location map, right? You would use block usually. So the reason for that being, basically there were three. First of all, there was this issue with embedding. It was you have a block entity and you have a block, and block entity was never designed to be displayed like outside of the block. It's not like embeddable entity by design in Drupal 8. It might be possible in Drupal 9, but it's not in Drupal 8. So like 1 year ago when we were like discussing if to go with block, we came to an agreement that it's like we don't know if we misuse this entity, if it's going to work in future versions of Drupal. It was, if it's going to work, for example, 8.6, 8.7, if we wanted to rework the solution, so kind of it was like a, let's say, future-proof solution. Then there was this issue with block permissions. We needed to specify the permissions on more, let's say, granular level, and there is an open issue in block module for quite a long time, actually, which should handle these more granular permissions. It's quite complicated, and there was kind of no telling if it will be solved in like foreseeable future. And and the third reason was that like we have many boxes, really many, and if you create a block, then it creates this entry on the block overview page, right? And I really like to reserve the page for such like building blocks of the website, not the boxes which we use like within the nodes for purposes of embedding and so on. So this was the reasoning behind it. And now I will show you how the website looks in the administrative UI, how we are using these paragraphs and boxes to make, for content editors, the website completely editable. I will also show you a super cool inline content editing plugin, which kind of solves at least partially, and for us, this issue with decoupled solutions. It's not so easy to provide inline editing for content editors when you have a decoupled Drupal solution. Because within Drupal itself, it's fine, but from the Angular application, the inline editing to Drupal is not so easy to provide. So yeah, well, let's share the. I have prepared videos because I strongly believe that if something can go wrong, it will go wrong, and I don't like surprises. So okay, so this is basic. Yeah. You don't see anything. 1 second. Okay, let's do it like this. Hello. No? Nothing? Come on. Okay. Let's do it very simply. The class is
can you duplicate your screen instead of like separating?
Yes, I could. I found the right combination here to switch.
Yeah, I don't repeat Windows right now.
Okay, sorry for the technical issue. Okay, so here we have like a kind of landing page. You see the menu, you see this kind of hero box, which has some text, title, and image. Then you see basically what we call a grid component, so it's like multiple items with some icons, titles, and texts. Then we will see multiple variations of these, like we call it photo box. It's a box with picture, text with title and some button. In the bottom, here you see different layout, which is customizable in the content management system. You will see one more layout later. Below it, you see another application of the grid component, so that's like multiple items which you kind of can use to like show the facts. This thing is like a, let's say, screen-wide call to action. We will see all these components in the administrative UI in a minute. And this is like the latest variation of the photo component with different background and text colors and so on. And below you have list of blog posts, and below blog posts you have a footer. So basically, all these things are like embeddable on every page with the help of paragraphs. So in the administrative UI, it looks kind of like this. You see that we have a content overview page, we have boxes overview page, which we will kind of see later. Okay, now we are editing the page itself, which we saw before. You can see all these building blocks here. As we said, boxes don't have, they are not inline editable, so they have standalone editing interface, so you just assign a box to be displayed on a particular page. And for example, grid, it's a paragraph type, so it has some kind of title, it has some options, and it has the tiles, which are the individual items. You can select, like, you will have 4 columns, 3 columns, 2 columns, and layout will be updated. All these data are provided to the front end as a structured data. So we provide an option in the CMS, and the front end decides how to interpret like 4-column layout. So one front end might not actually take that into consideration at all if they don't provide a feature. You know, it's the thing about decoupling that I can provide a feature on the content management side and wait for the front end to start supporting it. I shouldn't couple these things together. I shouldn't synchronize deployments. I shouldn't expect front end to be ready at the same time as back end. Just, you know, otherwise I'm just decoupling, like I'm just using different technologies, but I'm not really decoupling the systems. And the same way, actually, front end might be ready for the 4-column layout, Drupal not. Once Drupal implements it, it kicks in. So this is very important so that you can deploy these systems to production asynchronously, which saves quite a lot of headaches, I would say. Okay, so these are the individual tiles you see, just adding a text, nothing else that the editor would need to do, and some icon settings, options, and everything configurable. And that's basically how content editors handle grids. Now we shall see how boxes actually work. It's kind of similar to any list of content. We will check this first box. How it looks like. This is the photo box that we have seen just to remind ourselves. It should be around 102. Yeah, so this is the box we are talking about, right? So photo, text, and some button. Okay. Okay, and you see again there is a theme which can be kind of chosen from predefined options, also style, also animation, that is sliding door animation, so that the parts can kind of come together or they don't. Like in this case, these bits, it's not very useful for box. We have just one bit of, again, text. So, yeah, you have links, basically tells you like, okay, this is a primary button with orange color. Again, I just discovered that I was looking at a different box. This one, sorry, this one is the one you see in the admin UI now. So the style of the button is also like configurable. Okay, now we're gonna actually check the this ribbon component, this one which we see here. Again, it's very You see the video does exactly what I kind of thought it will be doing. Okay, so again, some text, some action link with theme, all, let's say, very organized so that the content editors really have to follow the standards that we set for them. Every box, as I said, it has like a standalone editing interface. It's not edited inside a node, so it's very handy to have some kind of usage tab and to see like on which nodes this box is used. So, okay, this is basically it. Now, you might be asking yourself the question like, content editor sees this page, right, in the front end. There is no inline editing, obviously, because there is none by default. And how is he going to find out that he should edit, like, I want to edit this box and I should edit precisely that box on the box overview page, you know, because you may have 3 boxes on every second page. So you might have 20 boxes of the same type. So how to identify the right one without really knowing how Drupal works and stuff? My colleague created this cute browser extension here, which you enable. It shows you all the box names here, and works basically in a way that if you click on any of those red icons, it will take you to the Drupal interface, like to the edit page for that particular box. So we're going to edit this one photo box, and it basically takes me to the correct box in Drupal. So it's kind of let's say cheap and fast way to solve the inline editing, although it's not inline editing. You know, it's really a helpful thing for content editors, so they don't have to search through lists on the box overview, on the boxes overview page. The same would actually go for blocks or any list of content. Okay, now back to the presentation. Now it's going to be funny. If I am, you see, I'm learning. Cool. Okay. Okay. So we have seen the examples, and now you may ask yourself, if you are not familiar with the GraphQL module, like how much does it actually take to create, for example, a paragraph type and expose it via the GraphQL schema? The answer is it requires really not any custom code. It's only code you will have is the configuration export. So we basically have, I hope you see it. It's a list of modules just containing the export of the configuration, so that the particular box or paragraph type is provided in the GraphQL schema. So that's it. It's all works by default. You don't have to write any custom code until you create, for example, a custom field type. Then you have to write the GraphQL resolver for that, so that the GraphQL knows what the field should actually display. But other than that, if you are using fields provided by other modules which are known to GraphQL, you don't have to do anything special. Sorry, last point. Configuration considerations and challenges. So I touched this thing. Be very careful about breaking changes to GraphQL schema. Take an example. I have a paragraph type. I want to remove a field from that paragraph type. So the natural reaction would be to remove the field. But if I do it, and my frontend expects that paragraph field to be there, I've broken the integration. The frontend won't work because the schema won't. He's basically querying something which is not in the schema, so it won't return anything. So if I do it, I need to deploy synchronously content management system and frontend. So what I do, preferably, is to create a new version of the paragraph type and write a migration script to migrate the content from the old paragraph type to the new paragraph type, which doesn't contain the field anymore. And now the frontend can use the old paragraph type until it is ready and can use the new one. So we just switches to the new one, content management system is already deployed, and it is done. And so this is the preferred way to really avoid any breaking changes. You cannot always guarantee that, of course. It might be that some breaking change comes from the GraphQL module itself, And if you want to update the module, the breaking change will be there, but at least try to kind of guarantee that you don't introduce breaking changes with your custom code or with the way you handle the content types and paragraph types and stuff like this. Another side benefit of this versioning is kind of independent, let's say, planning of development. It might be, and it surely will. I mean, if you have different teams maintaining the content management system at the front end, which is very reasonable assumption. If you have something built in Angular and in Drupal, it might be the same people maintaining it, but more likely it will be different developers. And now you might have shortage of developers in one team, but free space, free capacity in the other team, right? So you want to continue. You can continue the feature development in the other team, and once the first team has the free capacity, they will just catch up. Okay. Otherwise, you have kind of nothing to do for them. Okay. Documentation. You should really think about having some content editing guide for content editors and keep it up to date, because decoupling itself introduced some more complexity for the content editors, so it's very wise to provide them with some kind of guide, some kind of reference they can refer to, so they don't refer to you. Otherwise you will just be asking questions of the content editors and you will be doing any productive development work, which is, I presume, nobody's goal. So yeah. Note to this: if you have seen the administrative interface, if you have seen how the administrative UI looks like in our case, like the options and stuff, you can clearly see it's not really optimal way how it should be. I mean, you can do it more nicely, more intuitively and stuff, but it's kind of a process which we are, let's say, which we will focus on now, and also following the trends, general trends in the administrative UI for Drupal, and we will definitely work on this part. However, I think it's always better to have something which is, let's say, suboptimal and have some reference which the content editors can use, because then they are able to orient themselves in it. Then to develop something which is more optimal but has no documentation, because they will kind of in the end lose themselves. So it's like a matter of priorities. Okay, security is important thing. By default, GraphQL schema would basically expose, whatever you tell it to do. So if you tell the GraphQL schema to expose users, it will expose users. So that's maybe not something you want. So there's a configuration page for GraphQL modules, and you can just say what entity types you want to have exposed. So this is one thing to check. So performance is another consideration. So by default, GraphQL queries are cached in Drupal database. That basically means that on every GraphQL request you need to bootstrap Drupal and retrieve the data from the database. So it might be reasonable to introduce some Redis caching or even some CDN caching to kind of get rid of this necessity to bootstrap Drupal on every request, which is really not necessary. There is also another feature of GraphQL. It's called persisted queries, and so these queries basically have two cool features. One, they kind of limit the scope of what queries the consumer can execute to those which are persisted, to those which are predefined. Let's say it's predefined queries. You are in a restaurant and you have pizzas, right? You have 50 pizzas, and usually you have also the numbers, next to those pizzas, so you don't have to try to, pronounce the complicated Italian names of the pizzas which you actually cannot pronounce. At least in my case, you just say the number. So this is the same thing with persisted queries. You just say the number of the query, number 12, execute this with these parameters. For example, node ID is something, I don't know, and the result is returned. So security aspect is one thing. You have total control over which queries the consumer can execute, and second is caching. So that's kind of that's obvious. And if you have a very large query, which might easily happen, it also saves you the bandwidth, because you don't have to send the whole query, just send the parameters and the number of the query, and the GraphQL server knows, Drupal knows which query to execute. And lastly, please be sure there is a valid business case for a decoupled solution, because you can kind of see that it is, no matter what you do, it is of higher complexity than just simple Drupal site. If nothing, you need to have people who are experts in Drupal and who are experts in, for example, Angular, React, Vue.js, anything you choose, right? So it kind of, you need a bigger team, and this versioning stuff and everything is planning the development. It just adds more like planning, maintenance overhead. So be sure that you actually need a decoupled solution before you actually start to build it. And yeah, basically, if you don't need the decoupling, the additional complexity to achieve some business goals, there is no reason to do it. Okay, so that's just the rule of thumb, to have just enough complexity to reach the business goals and not a bit more. Good. I think I'm actually finished. So thanks to the sponsors who made this event possible, and of course the organizers. And thanks to you for bearing with me. And if you have any questions, please ask. Okay. Yeah.
What software did you use for the GraphQL proxy? You have different data streams with GraphQL coming together, and you proxy that in order to serve to your backend.
Oh yeah. So the question was what kind of GraphQL proxy we were using to kind of facilitate the data transfer to the front end. I presume you mean this part in the middle, right? Yeah. There is a Node.js server, basically. It's an Apollo server running on Node.js, which kind of does schema stitching or providing custom resolvers for the REST endpoints, and provides the GraphQL schema to the front end.
So the caching of the query is actually done with Apollo?
Yes. Now this is the funny part. I don't have it this presentation because we are currently building it, so it's not in production yet. But what we will do, we will actually take out Drupal from the GraphQL server completely out, and the front end will communicate directly with Drupal through the persisted queries. We are now working on a solution to make it so, to make a kind of to have a proxy there, which will still keep Drupal non-publicly accessible. Yeah, exactly. So it was a reasonable solution in the beginning, but now we learned about the persisted queries. We will utilize the CDN caching option. So now it makes more sense to take it out and just let frontend communicate with Drupal. We are solving the thing that Drupal still stays non-accessible from the outside. Just those few specific queries can be executed by the client application, and it should have a big performance impact, because those query results will be cached on the CDN, So Drupal won't even know. We just need to solve the caching violation. It's the obvious issue. So yeah. Okay, if there are no more questions, I'll be hanging around tomorrow, so you can catch me up, and thank you. Ready? Run.
I have questions.
Yeah.
So, what is basically the difference between, besides of the syntax, of course, but between JSON API and GraphQL? It's basically the same solution, but in another two different things that do the same thing.
As I
No?
was saying, like JSON API basically, it's more mature.
Yeah.
That's one thing that would speak in favor of JSON APIs. However, we have like a bunch of backend systems which were already providing GraphQL queries, like GraphQL endpoints.
Yeah.
And we had nothing which would provide like JSON API endpoint, obviously, because it's like a Drupal thing.
Yeah.
So we knew that we will need to have the GraphQL knowledge, and so basically the decision was made that we will use like the same technology as we use for the other systems, because we were already building the Node.js server and stuff.
Yeah.
You know,
But
it was very
basically,
easy.
they do the same thing, but you guys decided in your use case
It
to
made more
use.
sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I wanted to ask.
No problem, don't worry.
I have time.
Yeah, okay, because this is just fast. We are currently experimenting with